don't you have something better to do than spending time with us? Why don't you just go look at your work data like you always do? You like that sort of thing, don't you? My mother, Susan, spoke through the phone screen, and her words pierced straight into my chest like sharp arrows. There was no warmth in her voice. Behind her, I could hear my sister Heather's shrill laughter, which only made me feel smaller, more pathetic. "Oh, Kelly, what's the matter?" Heather looked down at me from the other side of the screen, her face clearly lit with amusement. Behind her stretched the familiar garden. A large BBQ grill sat on the lawn, sending up delicious curls of smoke. The table was covered with a lavish spread of food. And then, I saw someone who shouldn't have been there. My husband John sat at that table, his head lowered awkwardly but unmistakably present. For the past 3 months, he had seemed distant, as if there were an invisible wall between us. I kept telling myself he was just busy with work. But now, looking at him on that screen, I realized that maybe this was the wall I'd been feeling all along. A cold realization stabbed through my chest. Their laughter and music spilled from my phone's speaker, flooding the quiet of my living room like a nightmare. "Heather, do you know what day it is today?" My voice, when I finally managed to speak, trembled so much it surprised even me. "Of course I do. It's your birthday, right? But you know we've got our own little thing going on here." Heather tilted her head dramatically and smiled. "So, yeah, that's that." And with that, she hung up. The living room fell into a dead silence. The warmth of anticipation that had filled my heart just minutes ago had completely vanished. In its place, deep inside me, I heard something shatter, quietly but utterly. No tears came. I simply lifted my head and looked around at the perfect space I had created. Today was my birthday. I had been preparing for it for a week. The kitchen was filled with the scent of happiness. Roast beef for my father, seafood gratin for my mother Susan, a jewel-like fruit salad for Heather and her kids. And for my husband John, the pasta that held so many of our shared memories. With every dish, I'd imagined someone's smile. So I stood in the kitchen all morning, pouring my heart into every detail. Everything was supposed to be perfect. The warm, loving birthday party I had dreamed of. Now it all felt like a cruel mirror, reflecting nothing but my foolish expectations and my desperate attempt to buy the affection I could never truly earn. They didn't come. Instead of celebrating with me, they held a party without me, and even my husband was there with them. And my mother had dismissed all my effort and success with a single phrase: "Your boring work." Slowly, I stood up from my chair. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something new. A cold fusion of the two, frozen deep within my heart. How did it come to this? Why had I spent so many years bending to their selfish demands? The answer lay buried in the faded memories of my childhood. Back then, I always lived in Heather's shadow. All the praise, all the affection from our parents went to her. And I was always starving for their love. I can't be like Heather, so I have to find another way to make them see me. Somewhere along the way, that thought took root. Maybe that's what drove me, to study, to succeed in business. When the marketing analytics tool I built with AI helped my company grow rapidly and even got featured in the media, everything changed. Their attitude shifted overnight. The first favor came from my mother. "Kelly, we're thinking of remodeling the kitchen. Could you help us out a little financially?" I jumped at the chance. For the first time, I felt like they needed me. When the renovation was finished, my mother looked around the gleaming new kitchen, wrapped her arm around my shoulders, and said for the first time, "Thank you, Kelly. I'm so proud of you." I can't even begin to describe how much those words meant to me. Those were the words I had longed to hear all my life. And because I wanted to hear them again, I kept giving in to their every request. But over time, those requests became entitlements. "Kelly, you can afford it," became their favorite phrase. Deep down, I already knew the truth. To them, I wasn't really family. I was just a convenient sponsor, someone who existed to fulfill their wants. I was only allowed a place within the circle of family so long as I kept paying for it. And even then, no matter how much money I gave, I would never truly stand at its center. I knew how humiliating that truth was. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to sever the tie. My hunger for approval had blinded me. But tonight changed everything. On the very day that was supposed to be mine, my birthday, they had erased me completely. I would no longer drain my hard-earned life for their comfort. At that moment, my heart felt strangely light, as if, for the first time, I had truly become free. I walked quietly across the living room and headed for my study. There was no hesitation anymore. Opening the door, I sat down in the leather chair by my desk and ran my fingers over the smooth lid of my laptop. The screen lit up, showing the familiar desktop. What I was about to carry out was a quiet, cold-blooded, and, above all, effective revenge. The first thing I opened was my financial management page. There, a list of scheduled automatic transfers appeared. At the top was the mortgage payment for my parents' house, something I had been covering every month to ensure their comfortable life. I moved the cursor over it and, without hesitation, clicked delete. A confirmation window popped up. "Are you sure you want to permanently delete this payment schedule?" "Yes." The faint click of the mouse echoed softly in the silent room. Next came the list of scheduled transfers to Heather's family. Those endless special requests. They never relied on me for basic living expenses. Instead, they expected my help for every special occasion or expensive purchase, as if it were a given. At the top of the list, next semester's tuition for her children's private school. Delete. Below that, a payment record for an online order. A designer dress Heather had asked me to buy as a birthday gift for her daughter. Cancel. One by one, I erased every financial tie that had kept me bound to them. All the payments that had let me pretend to be the good daughter and good sister. All their precious celebrations and luxuries. They had all been funded by me. When the last transaction disappeared, I opened my email client. In the search bar, I typed the name of the travel agency I had booked with for the family trip scheduled for tomorrow. A private island in the Caribbean, an oceanfront villa with white sand beaches booked exclusively for us. I had even arranged all the flights myself. Every year they looked forward to this trip as if it were their right. And every year I paid for it, just to see them smile. At the bottom of the page glowed a red button, Cancel all reservations. I pressed it firmly. When it was done, I stood from my chair and walked over to the large window. I just wanted to be loved, to be seen as part of my family. Ever since I was a child, I'd been told, "You're smart but not very cute." That quiet wound had stayed with me all my life. At some point, I began trying to fill that hollow with money, trying to buy their approval through expensive gifts and lavish trips. How foolish, how utterly empty. But it's over now. The me who tried to buy a love with money, she died tonight. The reflection in the window showed no tears, only calm determination. The next morning, I woke with a sense of peace. John was gone from his side of the bed. What had happened the night before felt like a nightmare, but when I walked into the living room and saw the untouched scene, I knew it had all been real. The uneaten food, the perfectly set table, the silence. I picked up a large trash bag and, without emotion, began clearing the dishes. One by one into the bag. By the time I had finished cleaning everything and polished the kitchen until it gleamed, my smartphone began to vibrate softly. On the screen, the name Heather flashed. I took a slow, deep breath and slid my finger across the screen to answer. The moment the call connected, Heather's furious scream nearly burst my eardrums. "Kelly, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Behind her voice, I could hear the familiar chaos of an airport. Announcements, rolling suitcases, the low murmur of travelers. It seemed they had already arrived at the airport. "I'm standing at the check-in counter right now, and they're saying, 'Your reservations were all canceled as of last night.' Can you believe that? The airline says you did it. Fix this right now, you useless." I said nothing. I just listened quietly as she hurled her rage at me. And when she paused to catch her breath, I tapped the red end call button. Almost immediately, the screen lit up again, this time with a message from my mother, Susan. "Kelly, please, there's been some kind of mistake. Call the airline right away." Heather is furious. "You've gone too far with your little joke. Everyone's waiting for you, you know?" "Please answer the phone, Kelly." Her messages shifted, line by line, from pleading to commanding. I could see that old, ingrained arrogance shining through. The assumption that, as always, I would obey. I placed the phone face down on the table, turned away, and went to my study to check my work emails. My company was in the middle of a critical project phase. That was where my attention belonged now, not on a group of overindulged adults throwing a tantrum at the airport. Hours passed. When I finally picked up my phone again, it looked like a war zone. Dozens of missed calls, over 100 unread messages, and a flood of voice recordings. Out of mild curiosity, I played the newest one. It was chaos. Heather's shrill screaming, my mother's frantic attempts to calm her, and the cries of children in the background all blending together. I told you, it was a mistake. Mommy, I want to go home. From those fragmented voices, I could almost see them sitting on the hard benches of the terminal, stranded and helpless. Then the phone rang again. Heather, calling once more, her name flashing insistently across the screen. This time, I chose to answer. Hello? My credit card doesn't work. What are we supposed to do now? Her voice was breaking, on the edge of hysteria. Apparently, she had tried to rebook the trip herself, but the card she used was one of the family cards I had issued, the payments for which I'd been covering every month. Of course, I had canceled them all last night. I even called the villa. They said the reservation was canceled. You did this, didn't you? Do you have any idea how humiliated we are right now? I let her rant until she ran out of breath. Then I spoke, quietly but clearly. Yes, I did all of it. There was a sharp silence, followed by Heather's piercing scream through the receiver. But I was already beyond caring. I ended the call and powered the phone off. That evening, the doorbell rang. On the video monitor stood John, looking utterly drained. Gone was the awkward expression I'd seen on the video call the night before. Now his face was etched with guilt, fear, and something that almost resembled regret. I unlocked the door without a word. Kelly. He stepped into the living room, but the moment he faced me, his voice failed him. He just lowered his head as his shoulders trembled slightly. I said nothing, waiting for him to speak. After a long silence, his voice finally broke through, shaky, low, barely audible. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you like that. Never meant to? I repeated coldly. Then what exactly did you mean to do? On my birthday, you chose to celebrate. With my family, without me. And you didn't even come home afterward. That's all the truth I need, isn't it? It's not like that, Kelly. It was... John broke off, covering his face. I was being threatened. Threatened? The word was completely beyond anything I had imagined. By whom? John lifted his face. His eyes were red and wet with tears. Heather. I caught my breath. Heather had... John? For what reason? Seeing my confusion, John began to unfold everything. What he told me was uglier and more despicable than I could have imagined. About 3 months earlier, Heather had called him aside and made an unbelievable demand. She wanted him to have an affair with her. John refused outright. Then Heather's smile dropped and her true face came through. Go ahead and refuse. But if you don't do as I say, something could happen to Kelly. Her eyes were not sane. John had always known Heather could go to extremes when she fixated on something. Lying, manipulating, even hurting others without remorse if it got her what she wanted. The family had long looked the other way. Stop joking around, John said, but Heather thrust a photo right in front of his eyes. It was a photo of me jogging alone, secretly taken from a distance. See? Kelly is so careless. She runs the same route at the same time every morning. What do you think would happen if I asked a few of my old friends, some not-so-nice people, to teach you a lesson? Making it look like an accident would be easy. Her voice was the very whisper of a demon. John felt a chill run down his spine. His instincts screamed that this was no empty threat. Heather was absolutely capable of doing it. With my safety held hostage, he found himself powerless to resist. One wrong move, and real harm could come to me. Convinced of that, John had no choice but to give in to Heather's unreasonable demands. She watched me constantly, so I wouldn't tell you. She set up the party yesterday. Told me to go to her house without telling you, or else. I thought I was protecting you by obeying. But his voice broke into sobs. When I saw you on that video call, I finally understood. In the name of protecting you, I ended up hurting you the most. I can't live with that. He took his smartphone from the inside pocket of his jacket, his hands trembling as he operated it, then turned the screen toward me. On it were several horrifying messages from Heather. I'll be waiting at our usual hotel tonight at 8. Don't be late. As long as you do what I say, Kelly stays safe, but if you betray me... Then he played an audio file. a secret recording of one of his conversations with Heather. Her voice, cold and unmistakable, filled the room, threatening John while hinting at the same terrible warning. "I'm so sorry, Kelly. I'm so sorry." John crumpled at my feet and sobbed like a child. I took the phone and stared at the mute evidence. Heather's motive was plain: jealousy and a warped possessiveness that drove her to take my husband and wreck my life. What she had done was unforgivable. Then John dropped an even colder revelation. She would sometimes say, "Mom's backing me on this." I didn't believe it at first, but the moment he said it, a new, icy horror ran through me. The dots connected in the worst possible way. The person who had most encouraged Heather's warped possessiveness was no one else but our mother, Susan. That bone-deep truth erased whatever final scraps of familial affection I'd been clinging to. I laid a hand on John's shaking shoulder as he kept crying and said quietly, "Look at me, John. The person you should be fighting is not me." He lifted his face slowly, his tear-streaked eyes met mine. "What do we do now?" "It's decided," I said, gripping his phone firmly. "We fight this together." The next morning, as John slept beside me, the torment that had once clouded his face was gone, replaced by a look of relief. Last night, he confessed everything to me, and we talked together until dawn. By the time the first light touched the sky, we had come up with a plan. While I was in the kitchen brewing coffee, the doorbell rang. Loud and urgent. The monitor showed the faces I had expected. My father and mother, their expressions tight with anger. Heather, furious and wild-eyed. And beside her, her husband Ben, looking bewildered. I took a deep breath, walked to the door with steady steps, and opened it. "Good morning, everyone. What's all the hurry about?" I greeted calmly. For a moment, my composure seemed to throw them off, but then Heather exploded. "Good morning, you ruined our trip. Do you know how disappointed the kids are?" she screamed. My mother followed, equally hysterical. "Explain yourself, Kelly. How dare you embarrass us like this?" My father folded his arms and shot me a hard look. They all seemed certain, without even considering otherwise, that I would apologize and immediately make arrangements to fix everything. "Well, let's not stand in the doorway. Come in. I actually wanted to speak with you all." I was smiling slightly as I said that and invited them into the living room. My calm seemed to needle them further. Heather clicked her tongue and flopped onto the sofa with obvious irritation. When she saw John standing resolutely at my side, her composure flickered for a second before she put her usual smug mask back on. "John, say something. Tell this idiotic sister of mine off." But John said nothing. He simply stood beside me, silent and steady, looking straight at Heather as if to protect me. The room hummed with tension. I took a slow sweep of the people on the sofa, then began in a quiet, measured voice that allowed no contradiction. "Now that everyone is here, let's get to the point." "The point? Don't be ridiculous. The point is that you ruined our trip. Apologize and reimburse us in full. Now," she shouted, slamming the table with her words. I ignored her outburst. My eyes, however, were fixed not only on Heather but on my mother, whose expression had turned sharp and unreadable. "Heather, you've been threatening John for 3 months. And you, Mother, you knew about it and did nothing." The air in the living room froze. The color was drained from Heather's face. My father and Ben exchanged looks and silently asked, "What is she talking about?" But my mother, after shooting a quick cutting glance at me, immediately dropped her eyes. That reaction said everything. Heather tried to laugh it off in a high, strained voice. What are you talking about? Threats? Don't be absurd." "Is that so? Then what is this?" I said, and mirrored my phone to the large screen in the living room. The display filled with message after message that Heather had sent to John. Cold, coercive notes so ugly they made the room audibly intake breath. My father exhaled sharply. Ben's face went pale. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Her skin had turned ashen. She was not surprised. She was horrified that the scheme she'd silently abetted with her daughter had been exposed. What is the meaning of this, Heather?" Ben demanded, but Heather could not answer. I kept going. "There's more." I played the audio files. Heather's voice poured from the speakers, soft, menacing. "If you don't do as I say, Kelly could be in danger. Making it look like an accident would be easy." At that, My father sagged into the sofa. Ben's face twisted with a mix of fury and disbelief, and he trembled. Cornered, Heather finally snapped. Yes, I did it. But it was just a joke. People who take it seriously are the ridiculous ones, she ranted, hysterical and defiant. Then my mother, who had until then listened in stunned silence, suddenly spoke up in defense of her daughter. Yes, Kelly, Heather was only a little jealous of your success. As her mother, I did what a parent does to help her child get what she wants. Those words, forgiveness of cruelty in the name of maternal indulgence, were the final blow. They revealed the root cause, my mother's warped, enabling love that had coddled Heather into something monstrous. The admission wiped away the last scraps of familial affection I might have held. I nodded quietly. At that very moment, when the truth lay bare and their complicity could not be denied, I felt everything fall into place. The living room door opened quietly and 2 police officers stepped inside. In front of my stunned father and Ben, one of the officers walked straight toward Heather. Heather Anderson, you are under arrest on charges of blackmail and attempted crime. At the metallic click of the handcuffs, Heather let out a piercing scream. What are you doing? Let me go. This is a setup. Kelly planned all of this. Then the second officer turned to my mother. Susan Anderson, you are also suspected of conspiracy. We need you to come with us for questioning. My mother collapsed to the floor, sobbing as the officers led her away with no resistance. My father simply covered his face, his shoulders sinking in defeat. Heather continued to struggle and shout until the very end, but it was useless. She too was taken away. Ben just looked at John and me with an expression full of regret before silently leaving the house. It was the exact moment when our family finally crumbled apart. A few months later, the verdicts came. Heather was sentenced to prison for blackmail. My mother received a suspended sentence for conspiring in the crime and for encouraging her daughter's actions. Heather was immediately served divorce papers by Ben, losing not only custody of her children, but also her social standing. With their financial foundation destroyed, the Anderson family completely fell apart. And I later heard that even my parents' house had been seized. Then came my new birthday. John and I hosted a small party in our backyard, inviting only a handful of friends we truly trusted. As I watched the scene unfold, I took John's hand in mine. Together, we had walked through the dark tunnel of threats and conditional love. And at that moment, I silently vowed to cherish this new, peaceful life we have finally earned, hand in hand with the person I loved.